the hidden costs of being lazy and what you can do to avoid it. So coming right out the gate, I'm gonna tell you guys a quick story about a book that I read that is absolutely amazing, and it's a book called Atomic Habits. And when I was reading that book, and I was doing it with my book club, as I was reading it, the first chapter smacked me and everybody else I was reading it in the face. The guy named James Clear, who's the author of this book, he talks about how your habits dictate who you're going to be. It builds your identity. So I'll give you guys an example. If I were to ask you, what do readers typically do? You would say they typically read. If I was going to ask you, what do writers typically do? You would say write. And if I were to ask you, what do basketball players typically do? They play basketball, right? It just makes sense. Well, what happens when you put up an identity of a lazy person, right? You typically do lazy things. You typically don't finish things. You procrastinate. You self-sabotage. All these things start to build in your way, almost like an obstacle, almost like a wall, and it stops you from accomplishing the goals that you need to accomplish. So one of the biggest costs coming right at the gate is identity. When you're lazy, what tends to happen is you start to see and pick up bad habits, and you start to lower your own standards and expectations. And when you have low standards and expectations, it makes it very hard for you to complete the goals that are actually going to be fulfilling. Because let's face it, fulfilling goals are hard, right? If you look at everything that's brought you happiness, before you had that thing, there was something that scared you. I give you a great example with myself. One of the scariest things for me was becoming a father. But guess what? One of the best things in my life right now is being a father, right? These things are not by coincidence. It's not by chance. That's why I'm telling you guys that when you are out there and you're trying to accomplish a goal, a task, whatever it is, then it's so important that you finish it all the way through, that you become what I call a completer. Because by not completing things, as I said, you pick up the habits of being a lazy person, being inconsistent. And it makes it even tougher for you to accomplish that next goal that you have on your to-do list. So one of the biggest things, one of the biggest costs of being lazy is, again, picking up the identity of a lazy person. The second cost that I want to make known comes actually from my time in college. So when I was in undergrad, I attended a university called Winthrop University. It's located in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And one thing that I absolutely struggled with was my writing. And here's the thing, to this day, I don't believe that I struggle with writing. I just think I didn't put enough time into it. So I'll tell you what would happen. So our teachers would assign us 7, 8, sometimes 10-page papers. And I'll get the paper, look at it, put it in my book bag and say, hey, you know what? I'll do it a week before. So a week comes, I pull it out, and I put some things together and I submit it. And when I get the returns back on the paper, to no surprise, I would get like a D or sometimes like a C on it. And the professor would say, hey, if you guys want to, you can actually go and do the revisions, bring it back for half credit. And that was something that I did a lot during my first year, just redoing papers, sometimes redoing projects and even exams. And when I step back and look at it, it looks like it took me a lot more time than it should have. It looks like it took me a whole lot of time doing the things the second time than if I would have just simply do it the first time correctly. Because here's the thing. The teachers would give us all the resources, all the feedback, and I would look at it and see, wow, I made a lot of mistakes. So I'll take that paper, I would go to the writing lab, get some tutoring, make the revisions, and then submit it. But here's the thing, if I would have done that the first time, I would have saved all the extra time that I spent revising it, and I could have put that extra time into either resting, training for track practice, or even working on other assignments for that exact same class. So one of the costs here that I'm trying to point to is that being lazy actually takes you more time, which makes life even harder for yourself. So think about this, right? Like if I'm lazy, I want to get something done quickly so I don't want to have to do it again. Well, if I'm being lazy and it takes me extra time to do something the second time, doesn't that make no sense at all, right? Like, do you guys get what I'm saying? So basically what I'm trying to say is do your due diligence, right? Take the extra time to make something right before you submit it, before you complete it, because there's nothing like having to redo something that you've already done. There's this old saying with carpenters and things like that where they say it's better to measure twice and cut once than to cut several times, right? So think about it. It's better to measure something it's better to measure something twice and cut once, right? Because we're sure of it, rather than going and cutting something multiple times and maybe even having to redo it because we messed up so many times on the first try. So that's the second point that I want to make here. The third point comes from a story about me moving to Miami and unfortunately having to get my teeth done, right? And what I mean by that is I had to get a root canal. Now, I don't know if you guys ever had a root canal, but they can be very expensive. And when I got the root canal, the dentist told me, hey, all you got to do is brush your teeth, right, twice a day, and invest in one of those water picks and an electric toothbrush, right? They told me to invest in those. But then also they told me, bro, if you would have just got a filling done, let's say 5, 6, 7 months earlier, you probably could have avoided this. And that's the thing with being lazy. You end up paying more money in the end than you would have in the beginning. On this podcast, I once told a story about how I was lazy with my car, right? Not spending the money to get it fixed or even getting a new car. And as a result, I was just throwing money away each month, just paying for this, paying for that. Even to the point where the mechanics really didn't know what to do with the car. They were just coming up with things. And when I looked at the total tab, it's like, yo, the money I'm spending, I can easily afford a new car. And that's the thing about being lazy, guys. It actually costs you more money in the end. Now, here's the thing that you want to focus on. Now, when you're being lazy, there's certain costs that you can cut, yes. But guys, there are some costs that are just inevitable. And if you cut it, it'll actually do you more damage in the long run. Okay, so I want you guys to remember, don't be lazy when it comes to spending on the right things, because if you do, you'll end up spending a lot more later. So just to give you a heads up, that filling would have cost me $120. The root canal cost me $1,200. So that's 10x. And that's all because I was being lazy with taking care of my teeth. Don't follow that mistake, guys. I'm telling you. And the last point that I want to make, one of the costs of being lazy is that it actually costs you opportunities. And some of these opportunities you can't get back no matter how hard you try. And I think the biggest example of this comes with Tom Brady. So back in 2001, the Patriots were playing against some team. I think maybe it was the Eagles or somebody. And what happened was Drew Bledsoe, the starting quarterback, gets hurt, goes down, and Tom Brady is called to fill his role. Tom Brady comes in, wins the game, but then he keeps winning games to the point where he actually wins a couple Super Bowls. He actually wins back-to-back Super Bowls during that time. And one of the greatest things about Tom Brady is that he was drafted in the 6th round, right? He was drafted 199th overall. So no one can say that, oh, Tom Brady, you've always been great. This was something that he had to prepare. He had to go through a lot of hard work to get to where he is, to become the person that he is, right? Think about what would have happened if he was lazy with this preparation. If he thought, man, there's no way Drew Bledsoe will get hurt. There's no way Coach Bill Belichick will put me in the game. Imagine if he approached work every day with that mindset. He would have gotten into that game and he would have threw a couple interceptions and then been benched, right? Or maybe he would have stayed in a couple games until Drew Bledsoe got healthy and then he would have just taken over. Because what happened was Drew Bledsoe got healthy, was told that he was actually going to get his role back, right? Was going to get his job back, and that never happened. And just to show you that Drew Bledsoe still had game, the next year he went to another team, I believe it was the Buffalo Bills, and he ended up being a Pro Bowler that year. So he was a really good quarterback, but Tom had prepared for this. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you're lazy, some of the cost is opportunities, and these opportunities you can't get back. Some other costs would be also happiness and fulfillment. Because if you find yourself slacking, being lazy, guess what's going to happen? People are going to leapfrog you and take jobs that you should have gotten. They're going to take customers that you should have gotten. They're going to take homes that maybe you should have locked in, right? So many different things like that. And I don't think any one of us should have to go through that pain and regret of knowing that I could have just pushed a little harder. Because if that's you, you may find yourself speaking with someone like me, right? A therapist to help you to get through those tough times, to get over some of that resentment and bitterness. So guys, these are some of the hidden costs of being lazy. And I promise you, if you take action, it will help you to overcome a lot of these costs and leave you not just wealthy materialistically, but internally as well. So my name is Coach Wells. Thank you for checking out this podcast, and don't forget to subscribe to it. All right, I'll see you later.